Today we're going to be talking about the steps involved in buying a property in Fortaleza and Ceara. Hello there, my name is Luciano Oliveira. I am a Brazilian attorney. I'm here in Fortaleza, Ceara, and today we're going to be talking about the main steps involved in buying a property in Fortaleza and Ceara in general. A foreign citizen should have a CPF, which is a tax ID, to be able to buy real estate property in Brazil. We have a link in the description below with the exact steps you need to take to apply for a Brazilian CPF tax ID by yourself without any cost. Take advantage, go to the description, find the link and get your CPF. The second step we recommend is for you to retain an attorney who can participate in some capacity in your property acquisition. This is important. You don't know the language, you don't know the culture, and unfortunately, there is a lot of fraud in real estate in Brazil. And even when you are dealing with a good realtor or a good real estate agency, there is still a lot of room for issues. Just to give you some examples, some of the properties, they're gonna have a co-ownership with the federal government, that is the so-called enfiteuse, and there is also a form of co-ownership with the past owner of the land where a building was built in. If you are dealing with less sophisticated realtors, sometimes they cannot even identify such issues and they are probably just gonna sell the property as there was no problem with the property. And later on, you're gonna know that there is such a problem, and although you can still get ownership of the place, not entire ownership because it's a co-ownership style. Usually the main owner, like if you buy the property, you're gonna own 83% of the property and the co-owner is gonna keep like 17%. The problem is you may have to pay additional taxes on top of the regular taxes, and when you try to sell the property, even though cash buyers, they can buy it without a problem, these properties cannot be financed. So you're buying on a cash basis. If you're selling to a cash basis buyer, all good, but the pool of buyers is going to be substantially reduced because those buyers who would need a finance, they are not going to be able to finance this specific type of property. So this is just one of the examples. Another common example, there is a property in probate and the realtor, he basically doesn't get that while the property is in a probate, you are unable to close on the property. Realtors, they are going to still push the property because they want you to buy it, they get their commission, and then you're going to be stuck in this process of waiting for the probate to finish so you can finally close on the property. To make things more challenging is the fact that some probates in Brazil, they may take not only several years but sometimes even decades. So you don't want to be tangled in such a situation. You are paying good money and you want to get what you're paying for. I know it may sound like a self-serving advice, but trust me, we have seen so many crazy things in the Ceara real estate market that even if you don't want to pay for an attorney to follow up during the entire acquisition process, hire an attorney at least for the main points such as contract review, due diligence, and reviewing the transfer deed papers before you go to the closing. Just a few hours could be enough for all of those activities to be completed, and it's gonna be a well invested money. In our experience, this is a must for real estate transactions in Ceara. So after you have someone looking after your purchasing process, the next stage is to actually find the property. I always recommend our clients to take their time, to not rush, and it's worth mentioning that realtors in Ceara, they are good and they are also very good in terms of pushing clients to close. This is understandable. If you don't buy a property that they are showing to you, you're going to be buying from someone else and they are not going to see any money. They are well trained to really push the envelope, and they are also very knowledgeable about how to push your buttons. Unfortunately, many of our clients, they come to us when they realize they are being pushed to accept a transaction without an option to review the terms or without any saying in in how the transaction is being structured. The realtor is going to ask, oh, did you like the property? Yes, I like it. What do you need to move forward? Oh, I don't know, I need to speak with my wife. They are going to lead some questions that are going to trigger you to say, all right, I'm going to buy it. When you realize you are committed to buying a property without really doing all the homework necessary to make sure that this is a sound opportunity, that you're doing your homework in terms of making sure that there is no other better property for you to buy, you're going to feel like you don't know the timeline, if you're going to get the deed at the closing, if you're going to pay first, or if they're going to transfer the deed first. So there are so many questions. That's why we really recommend you to take your time. Do not allow realtors to push you. And if you have an attorney by your side, this is going to kind of help you keep realtors under control. Whenever there is a lawyer, they are going to calm down a bit and they are going to push the realtor instead of you. And of course, lawyers, they are not going to allow a realtor to push them around. So you're going to be in a good position by knowing this type of practice. Another tip on the property search side is most properties are going to be advertised in the main portals. There are certain websites in Brazil, just like there is Zillow in the United States, where the properties are advertised. In Brazil, the market is a little bit more fragmented. There are about 4 different websites, and you can find a list of these websites in the links below. So you have an option to actually know firsthand what is in the market and to understand the price levels. Be aware, you don't need to sign an exclusive agreement with a realtor. You don't need to do that, and our advice is that you don't do it, because if you do it, you're going to be restricted to a small pool of properties that your realtor has access to. If you're not signing the exclusivity agreement, you are free to search and see every single property that you like and that you are able to find on your own. Using the website, you may be asking yourself, well, but I don't speak Portuguese. How can I use such websites? The good news is if you use Chrome and you right click on the website, this is going to give you an option to translate into your native language. It could be like English if you're from the US, the UK, Australia, New Zealand, and you can also translate into French if you are French, into German, and many other languages as well. The translation, of course, is machine translation, so it's not perfect, but in our experience, this is more than enough for our clients to be able to find the properties and to understand the main characteristics of such properties. Another advantage, if you just get information about a property through the realtor, you may not be sure about what is the asking price because someone is basically feeding this information to you. So even if you work with a realtor and if you get the information probably through WhatsApp, WhatsApp is the app of choice for Brazilians to communicate with other people. Maybe they're gonna just send you the address and the price. So one tip, ask for the realtor to share the link for the original listing for this property. This way, if you have the link, you're gonna know that the price being offered by the realtor is the same price that Brazilians would be paying for the property. I would guess most realtors, they are not gonna be playing games in terms of changing prices just because you are a gringo. But we saw that happening before, unfortunately. So here is another tip for you. Let's say you find the ideal property, and now what? The next step is for you to do some very brief due diligence before signing a contract. And the reason for that is once you sign a contract, you're gonna need to pay a down payment. And in our experience, particularly Brazilians, when they are selling a property, they sell a property, they get a down payment, they are gonna have something planned for this money. Maybe they're gonna buy another property, maybe they're paying debt, maybe they're planning a trip to Europe. And unfortunately, many sellers, if the transaction does not go through, they may not have the means to refund you in case the transaction does not go through. So our recommendation is that you do some level of due diligence before signing the contract. And again, we strongly recommend that you hire an attorney. An hour of an attorney time could be enough for a deed to be reviewed, for instance. and this could save you a lot of trouble down the road. Next step would be signing the actual contract. I know that in the US in particular, there are forms that there are pre-approved by the Realtors Association, but not so much in Brazil. In Brazil, you're gonna see all types of contracts, and it is important for you to understand there is no single standard. Realtors will sometimes tell you, oh, this is a standard. This is not true. You can have any terms discussed and agreed with a seller, particularly if you're buying on a cash basis. So make sure to understand you have leverage and to structure the transaction in a way that's going to be convenient to you and not to the realtor. One example of contracts we see from time to time is when the realtor is going to push the parties to pay the entire commission upfront. The commission is usually paid by the seller, but you as the buyer is the one providing the monies for the seller to pay the realtor. So if you see that the realtor is going to be paid at the signature of the contract, that's a bad sign, because once the realtor is paid in full for their commission, you're going to become old business. So if you need help down the line, rest assured you're not going to be the realtor's first priority. On the other hand, if the commission is paid at closing, guess what? The realtor is going to be available at every single time you need a realtor to help you, because the realtor is going to be pushing this transaction to be concluded so they can be paid. And that's the only arrangement when it comes to commission that we advise on. Another tip on the contract side is that you should allow yourself enough time. For instance, they have some very particular needs. For instance, if you're single, you're gonna need to present a birth certificate with an apostille. If you are from the United States, if you are from the UK, you're gonna need to obtain a new birth certificate, and then you're gonna need to send this document to Brazil for a sworn translation. Even if you're married, you're gonna need to follow a similar process. And if you're signing a contract saying that you're gonna perform in 15 days, there is not gonna be enough time for you to secure these documents. And the realtor who's working with you probably doesn't have a clue about that, and their main concern is that this thing closes so they can get their commission in full. In terms of timeline, our recommendation is that you do not sign any document with less than 45 days between signing the contract and closing. Even if you can close sooner, sometimes we are able to close with like 25 days, with 30 days. The 45 days is gonna allow you some wiggle room if things don't work as you expect. So do not let realtors to define a timeline that's not gonna be enough for you to perform. There are some serious penalties if you don't perform. For instance, some contracts, they are gonna call for 10% penalty on the property value plus damages caused to the seller. So be aware of that. There are many other things that may be revised in a purchase contract. So that's why we advise you to retain an attorney, if not for the entire transaction, at least for those main points. After you sign the contract, it's time for a more thorough due diligence to be completed. This is usually done with the assistance of realtors. They are gonna get the most basic certificates of clearance. Certificates of clearance are certificates checking on the property taxes. The certificates are going to say taxes on the property were paid. There are also certificates of clearance on the sellers, and those certificates handled by the realtors are usually the most basic ones. Whenever you have a lawyer involved, they are going to go an extra step and also look for other things that are not addressed by a certificate of clearance but could also impact on your ownership of the property. And this is why we strongly recommend you to retain an attorney, again, at least for the key points of the transaction. Now, let's say if the due diligence was done, everything is good. Next step is gonna be the closing. That's where the surprise usually happens for many of our clients, and then they come to us, because if they have retained us from the get-go, they are not surprised at any stage. But if they don't have an attorney, when they realize that they are gonna have to pay the seller up front in full in order for the seller to sign the transfer deed, they get really desperate. And this is true. Brazil doesn't have an escrow account, and Brazil doesn't have a title insurance. So on the title insurance side, you get a really thorough and in-depth due diligence to make sure there is no problem with the title of the property. If there is a title problem, nobody is going to come to help you. So that's why it's so important to have a more thorough due diligence completed. On the escrow side, the problem is you need to pay the seller, of course, and the seller is not going to sign the transfer deed until you pay, but there is no escrow account. So usually in Brazil, the buyer is going to pay the seller on the day of the closing. And that's as much as you can do to reduce the risk. The problem with foreign citizens is you cannot make a wire instantaneously from, for instance, the United States or the UK or France or any other country to Brazil. That simply doesn't work. Brazil has a history of high regulation and red tape and bureaucracy when it comes to monies entering the country. So the solution that we have for our clients is to arrange a currency exchange bank that's gonna handle the transfer upfront, but it's not gonna release the funds until the last minute. We are not able to release on the exact time that the seller is signing the transfer deed, but we are able to time the release within a couple of hours from closing. On the day of the closing, we have communication with the realtors, we have communication with the buyer, we have communication with the seller. So if we see that everything is working as it should, the registry has the transfer deed papers ready to be signed, the sellers are on their way to sign the transfer deed, that's when we call the bank and we say release the funds into the seller's bank account. So this is not a real escrow account, but we like to joke that this is a poor man version of an escrow account, and it has been working really great for our clients. Make sure you understand that seller is not going to sign the transfer deed until they see the funds in their bank account. Some questions we hear about that: can I just take a check from my country? No, your check is no good in Brazil. Can I just transfer the money from my bank account in my native country to my bank account in Brazil? Most of foreign citizens, they do not have the capability of getting a bank account in Brazil. And even if you get a bank account in Brazil, the Brazilian central bank does not allow large sums of money to be transferred from your own bank account abroad to your bank account in Brazil, because you need to specify the purpose of the money entering the country. So if you're sending money for the purchase of real estate, you need to declare that this money is being transferred for the purchase of real estate. And if that's the case, banks are not going to release the money into your account. They want to release the money into the seller's account. And the reason for that is because banks are afraid that maybe you are just pretending to be buying real estate, and so they try to enforce the rules by releasing the money only into the seller's bank account. Commercial banks, they don't have the capability of releasing the money on a specific day. That happens randomly once they are able to complete the due diligence on the money. So that's why we strongly recommend that our clients work specifically with currency exchange banks. So about the closing, once you have everything arranged, on the day of the closing, the parties are going to attend the closing at a cartório. A cartório is a type of registry, and this registry has an officer, or actually multiple officers, and one officer is going to basically read the content of the transfer deed. And a good thing for our clients is that we are able to review the transfer deed up front. So when our clients attend the closing, they know exactly what they are going to be signing. Once the paperwork is signed by the seller and by the buyer, that's what the transfer deed, the closing, we call it in Portuguese a escritura. Just like it happens in the United States, there's going to be a second registry that's going to be in charge of the actual deed issuance. And once the deed is issued, the deed is going to show your name in the chain of ownership. Well, this was a very simplified overview of the property purchase in Brazil. I hope you like it, and follow us for more tips.